to the Chel Sweets Kitchen. Last week for one of my live streams for the Food Network, I made a really fun bunny rabbit cake and I liked it so much that I wanted to make a full tutorial for YouTube. So here I am. So to make it, we're going to be using 3 layers of my favorite vanilla cake base, and these are 7-inch rounds. We're going to be frosting it with a coconut American buttercream, which is just my favorite vanilla buttercream recipe with a little bit of coconut extract. And we're going to be filling it with toasted coconut and covering the outside with a little bit of just regular shredded coconut. So this cake is really easy because if you sometimes struggle getting perfectly smooth sides, or if you want to make this with your kids, we're going to be covering the exterior with that coconut, so it's going to cover up any imperfections, and it's just a really easy and fun technique to pull off. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in so you guys can see exactly what I'm doing as I assemble the cake. So just like always, I'm going to begin by putting a little bit of my buttercream onto our cake base. And this is a really important step because it helps you secure your first cake layer against your cake base so it doesn't slide around. We're going to grab our first cake round here. We're going to go ahead and settle this here. It's always important to also make sure that your cake layers are centered when you start, because as you build up it gets more and more difficult to shift your cake around your cake base, so always take a few seconds to do that. And again, the recipe for this cake base and this entire cake actually is up on chelsweets.com. So next we're going to begin putting some buttercream onto our cake layer. We just want a nice even layer of frosting here. You can add as much as you like or as little as you like. I like a lot of frosting because I have a big sweet tooth. But the important thing is just to make sure that it's level, no matter how much you prefer. So that looks good. I'm going to take some of our shredded coconut now, and I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle that on top. And if you want to toast your coconut like I've done, all you need to do is lay out some shredded coconut on a lined baking sheet and bake it at 325 degrees for 3 minutes, then stir it, and then bake it for another 3 minutes. And you'll get coconut that's golden brown, just like this. So we're going to repeat this process with our 3 remaining cake layers, and we then are going to start working on our crumb coat. So when I add my last cake layer, I always like to flip it upside down, and that makes it easier to get nice sharp corners as you're frosting, and that's because you know that the base of your cake is always nice and flat, so it just makes things a little bit easier as we're frosting. So now that we have all of our cake layers stacked, I'm going to start to apply some frosting around the cake to be our crumb coat. And the point of that is to trap all those crumbs in. So we're going to do 1 layer of frosting, we're then going to freeze, and then do another layer. I always like to add a lot of frosting to the top of my cake and then kind of spread it down as I go. There's lots of different techniques for applying a crumb coat, but this is just the way that I found is easiest. So as you can see, as I smooth this out, some of my cake is going to start kind of dripping over the side. Some of my frosting is going to start dripping over the side. And I'm going to start smoothing that kind of into the space between the layers. And this also will trap any coconut that might have slipped out of the edge, and will just help us get a smooth second layer of frosting. So now that I've covered the top portion of the cake, I'm working around the base and just continuing to fill in. Now that we've kind of gotten our cake evenly covered, I'm going to smooth out a little bit with a cake bench. And this is a 6-inch cake bench. I believe it's in Ateco, and I bought it on Amazon. So I'm going to go ahead and just spin slowly, just trying to smooth out that first layer. And again, we don't have to be perfect with this because we are going to be covering it in coconut, but I always use this technique when I'm frosting cakes, so we're going to do it for this one too. So you can see I've scraped off a lot of excess buttercream, and I'm going to go ahead and scrape that onto the edge of my bowl. And we're then going to smooth out the top portion just by gently pulling in with our cake bench. So not a lot of pressure, just very lightly pulling towards the center. So we're going to repeat this all the way around the cake. And we'll do one more little spin for a good measure. So that is definitely smooth enough for our first layer of frosting. I'm going to go ahead and pop this in the freezer for about 5 minutes until the frosting is firm to the touch. So now that our crumb coat is nice and firm to the touch, I'm going to re-stir my buttercream just to make sure that it's nice and smooth and it hasn't crusted at all. Looks good. And we're going to add another layer of frosting here. I like to add a lot of buttercream, like I said earlier, but if you don't want this much, you can definitely add less. It's all about your preference. So I'm going to go ahead and work this around. And we're then going to use the same technique as before and just kind of work our way down the cake with this lip of frosting. And now we're going to use our bench scraper. And you can actually omit this step if you don't have a bench scraper, because we are going to be using the coconut next, and that will cover up any of these imperfections. So this is an optional step. Now that we've fully frosted our cake, we're going to set aside our frosting ingredients, and it's time for our coconut. We're going to remove our cake from our cake stand, set that aside, and we're going to place our cake into any kind of baking sheet that you have that's big enough to fit your cake round in. So it's important to use a baking sheet because as we cover our cake with our coconut, we want to make sure that we don't get coconut all over our kitchen, and this will kind of help contain the shredded coconut. So we're going to firmly press this into our cake, and we're just going to work our way all the way around. I like to kind of scoop up and press nice and firmly. So you want to press firm enough to make sure that the coconut is sticking to your frosting, but not too firm that you're denting your cake. So you definitely want to kind of get a feel for this as you go and see if you think you're pressing firmly enough or if you need to apply a little more or less pressure. We've now covered the entire sides of the cake, and once I do that, I always like to just kind of press in gently with my hands to make sure that the coconut really is on there nice and firmly. But again, you want to be careful with this. The second layer of frosting that I added is kind of cold to the touch now because our cake was frozen. And so that makes it so that I can touch it and I'm not getting frosting all over my hands. I just have bits of coconut. So just be careful as you do this, and it really depends on how cold your frosting is. So if your frosting is pretty warm and you can't touch it and not have it stick, be very careful with this step. To begin to make the bunny face, we have to make the bunny rabbit's cheeks, and those we're not making out of fondant. We're going to be making them out of some buttercream. So I've placed some of my leftover American buttercream into a piping bag, and I've cut open the tip, I would say about 1.5 centimeters, and we're going to go ahead and pipe some nice big circles onto our cake. So to make sure that our bunny rabbit's cheeks are equal in size and symmetrical, we're going to use a cookie cutter just to kind of outline where we want our cheeks to go. So I think I'll have one there. Kind of press in so you can definitely see the indent. And we'll have the other one right about there. And this is also good so you can make sure that you're not going to go over the edge of your cake. It's centered. That looks good. So we're going to go ahead now and take our piping bag and we're going to do some nice, just actually a big swirl. And don't worry, we're going to smooth this out in a minute. So using a smaller offset spatula, we're going to go ahead and just kind of smooth this out so that it looks like a rabbit's cheeks. So I'm using a very gentle touch here just to try to kind of bring together those lines. So now that we have our cheeks on our cake, we're going to start to add our facial features. So as you can see, I've made a really fun bunny rabbit face out of fondant. So I used black, light pink, and white fondant. And I went ahead and made the ears a couple days in advance just because I really made thick pieces of fondant and I wanted them to be fully dried, so they're really nice and sturdy. So you can see they're going to hold up their own weight when we insert them into the cake. So I'm going to go ahead and slide this over and we're going to start adding that face onto our cake. So first we're going to add our eyes, which we're just going to put right above our cheeks. So we're going to add them just a little bit to the side of the center of the cheeks. Next we're going to add on the nose. We're going to nestle that right on top of the cheeks. Next it's time for the mouth, which we're going to go ahead and slide right in between the base of the cheeks. And next I made some really tiny little whiskers that we're going to go ahead and just push into the exterior of the cheek. Alright, so our second to last step is to insert our ears. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Alright, so the last step now is to cover the top of the face with some more coconut. So I'm going to do this pretty carefully and I'm just going to sprinkle it between his eyes. I'm going to leave his cheeks uncovered so that way they really stand out, but I am going to fill around his eyes and the rest of his face. And there you have it, our bunny rabbit cake is complete. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to click the like and subscribe button below. If you want to see more of my cakes, you can follow me on Instagram at ChelSweets, and also the recipe for this cake is up on chelsweets.com. So now it's time for my favorite part of every cake, and we're going to cut into it. And I know it's sad because our bunny rabbit is so cute, but it's gotta happen. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut out his mouth. So we're just gonna go ahead and make one nice big slice. There we have it. You can see the beautiful toasted coconut inside and all of our coconut buttercream.